So thanks for being here. Just another Neo chats on the subject of innovation tonight. And Alex, would you like to just introduce yourself to our listeners? Just who you are, what you do.
Yeah, sure. My name's Alex Moore, based in sunny Dorset, which is in the UK, England. And I teach at a school called Shaftesbury School, which is in the UK, a secondary school. We have 1,000 students. And we're part of a larger academy chain that has 17 schools, which represents over 5,000 students and around about 800 staff. So yeah, that's me. That's where I'm based. And my role is lead teacher of innovation, of teaching and learning. So it's my job to go out and find the most cutting edge pedagogies and try and marry them with best teachers, which is a pretty cool job.
Thanks so much for being here today, Alex. And again, I think you're doing great things from what we've seen before. And I think the audience is going to really like today's sharing from your end. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I'm thinking about that phrase you used there, cutting edge, because I seem to remember you using it elsewhere as well. And that's the first thing I would like to ask you is, you're talking about cutting edge in terms of pedagogies, no? Pedagogical approaches or...
Both, yeah. So technology and sort of pedagogy are the two things that I'm really interested in. And I think when they work together, you get the perfect harmony of just fantastic learning experiences. But sometimes, obviously, you can have loads of amazing technology, but if it's not particularly impactful or isn't being delivered well by highly skilled practitioners, then it can kind of fall by the wayside. And that's what I kind of make my whole life in school and my work about, trying to avoid those types of experiences.
So, I mean, if you're sort of bridging the technology pedagogy gap, which is a definite barrier to progress, because, well, I mean, in my experience in education, teachers are quick to write off technology as kind of tokenistic and things because there's a gap with the pedagogical support and things. So it's easy to say, oh, that's just, yet another app, and oh, we've all got to have iPads now and whatever. And but it's got to be supported by a longer term strategy. But what I'd like to ask you is, I mean, within the, and I'm going to use the word confines of, Ofsted inspections and, these kind of reports and tables and, so the school inspection culture. How do you manage to sort of reconcile what you would call cutting edge innovation with the confines of a traditional system? Right? How do you, to what extent can you maneuver? I mean, are you kind of flying under the radar with a lot of it? Are you pushing boundaries or?
No, that's an amazing question. I think there's quite a few layers to it. So I'll try and unpick it. And if I miss anything, come back to me. But essentially, I'm yet to meet an Ofsted inspector. And in the UK, we have a sort of an inspection framework called Ofsted, who they're like the watchdog for the government to keep an eye on what's happening in schools, essentially. And they come in every 3 to 4 years, depending on how your school's doing. And they look at lessons, they look at data, and they form a judgment about your school, which obviously has quite an impact on people's perceptions of your school in the local community and further afield. So firstly, we never really do anything for Ofsted. I've always been of the mind that if you're doing something that's having an impact and the students are on board and the learning is top class, world-class learning, then Ofsted will come in and they'll be really impressed. And if data is kind of an end product that they use to measure their outcomes, but if the process of what they see is working and they see students that are switched on, engaged, passionate about their learning, I'm yet to see an inspector walk away and say, well, that was a gimmick or that was a fad. Most of the time, or all of the time that I've seen them, certainly in my lessons and some of my colleagues, they've been impressed with cutting edge technology if it serves a purpose and if it's sort of creating really purposeful learning in the classroom. And that's what I'm really into. You mentioned that whole idea about technology can be a bit faddy, and the ed tech business as a whole, I think, is a bit guilty of these bombastic statements. Oh, we got the next great app and it's going to transform education forever. And I think there's a debate there about what constitutes what I call warm technology and disruptive technology. And disruptive technology, is okay if it's disruptive in a positive way. But what you were alluding to is the latest app that crashes whilst everyone's trying to use it. And the teacher then thinks, right, I'm never using that again. That was embarrassing. I've lost faith in that app. And they ditch it and they leave it. And then that's that. Whereas I think what I'm about and what we're about where I work at Shaftesbury is embedding more long-term change through technology and really looking at the ed tech that is warm. So fantastic ed tech that is well thought out, that has been worked on by ed tech companies with educators rather than ed tech companies just going for it alone. and then bringing that to the classroom and doing some action research and speaking to the students as the key actors in the learning and saying, well, come on then guys, what did you think of that VR app? Oh, it was rubbish, sir. Don't use that again. Or actually, it was really amazing and it made that 10 minutes of the lesson unforgettable. So I think there's a lot there to unpick. And essentially, I guess the moral of the story is don't do stuff for Ofsted, but when they come in, let them see a true representation of what's going on and just point them to the students. Like, let them go and speak to the students. And the students always tell the truth. They always tell, you know, what it feels like to be using this stuff. So, yeah.
Wow. It resonates a lot with another chat that we actually had on around innovation and such, and I think it's really important to give the voice to the students, and you're saying it very very clearly. It's a matter of understanding that even if administrators or professors might think that a certain edtech solution is the best for the class, in any case, at the end, it's the students who make the final decision. So I guess a question for you, Alex, would be how would you actually recommend to other teachers or other school administration who are in the process of integrating these new features or new edtech solutions in the classroom, but are actually afraid to fail? What would you say to them?
That's a great question too. I think there's a couple of things to sort of pick up there. I mean, firstly, we find ourselves in a situation, don't we, currently, where the teachers that we're kind of talking about that were a bit fearful of technology have had to get on board and embrace it because of the lockdown situations we find ourselves in. So we're in an interesting time, really, because teachers are starting to view technology now as a tool that they need in order to teach the lessons currently. And I think post-COVID, like the classroom after the storm, if you like, it'll look very different. And I think those laggards, those people that were kicking and screaming and saying, we don't want to use technology, we want to stay to our traditional mindset, will actually be convinced that there's a place for them. And it's hard, it's really, really hard to convince those people. And I don't have the silver bullet, but I think one thing is to let them try it. So, for example, we've created something called a future classroom at Shaftesbury School, which is essentially a showcase test hub classroom, and it has no desks at all. It doesn't look anything like a traditional classroom. So, imagine a time traveling child from 150 years ago coming into the year 2020, 21. What would they recognize? Well, they'd instantly recognize a classroom because it has not changed in 200 years. It's fit for the Industrial Revolution. So my first motivation when I built the room at school was to rip that up and disrupt that model and have a space that is very agile. Students can move around in it and they can work collaboratively in teams. The technology kind of came as a second thing. So the space came first. So I was looking at industry and I was looking at companies like Lush Cosmetics and Google and Innocent Smoothies and thinking, well, how do these guys get such amazing outcomes? And it was about the learning environments and the philosophy they set up within their working spaces. So I kind of borrowed that idea first and created a really engaging room that people could move around and work in. And then I brought the technology in second. So the plan was to try to get the teachers on board with my ideas of how to teach in the room, first of all. And one of those ideas was not to teach from the front, which is a huge challenge for a lot of teachers, because if you go to a normal classroom, it's 60 minutes. Teachers stood up the front, direct instruction, kids are writing stuff down, students are writing stuff down. So we had to rip that up. And the biggest challenge for me and other teachers has been teaching from the side of the classroom and teaching from the back of the classroom. It's really hard to let go of that and let the students kind of immerse themselves in the learning and then kind of come in as a coach when you need to, when they need your support and when they're stuck with something. And embedding that culture of failure in the students, it's okay to fail. It's a first attempt in learning. And then the staff too. And if anything, the students got it easier. They were like, yeah, okay, we'll have a go at this presentation. And if it goes totally wrong, we'll just do it again next lesson. And that's fine. But the staff were very much like, well, we need to get this right. And if we don't get this right, there's going to be a consequence and we probably won't come back in here to teach again type thing. So, yeah.
Great.